what we'll do now, we'll go into the different configuration options that you have available. So before we go into this, I'll actually delete the chart that we've got and we can start from scratch. So you can find the extension under Custom Objects, and then if you scroll down, you'll see it is named Acumen BI Chart. So we drag and drop that onto the page, just resize it. And then all we need to do to start with is add a dimension and add a measure. I'll just clear my selections. And you'll see that has automatically calculated the eye chart. So from here we have a number of configuration options. All of these are available on the panel on the right. So we can change the label for the date if needed. With the measures, we can also change the label here, so I might just rename that to be events. We can change the number formatting. You can choose whether to show data points or not. We can change the line color, line style, and line thickness as well. The ability to format other measures includes similar functionality for the other lines, so for the average, the upper control limit, and the lower control limit. And then when it comes to the points, so the highlighting of the three rules, you have the ability again to decide whether you want to show the highlighting of the rule. You can change the label, we can change the marker color, and we can change the marker size. So you'll see the orange outlier point has now changed. Exactly the same configuration for Rule 2 trends, Rule 2 runs, Rule 3 trends. And the other important thing that we can add in here is targets, or a target line. And in this case, we might make it a dark grey dashed and increase the thickness. And you'll see we now have a grey target line. So that gives you an idea of some of the ability to format the line styles and the point styles for the measures. Now the next thing we'll go into is the ability to configure the chart with a number of variables. So there are two methods for configuration of the chart and the data that goes into making up the average and the upper and lower control limits. We have the all points method and the baseline method. Effectively, the all points method takes into account all points up until a recalculation event. So in this case, it would start here on 1st 11th 2009, and it includes all points in the average and upper and lower control limits until we get to this point here, which is 1st of the 1st 2011. Now, if we choose the baseline method, and let's say if we set that to 10 points, it would only be taking into account the first 10 points when it comes to determining what values make up the average and the upper and lower control limits. So in this case, it only includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points to make up that average. And that includes whether it is recalculating or if it is not recalculating as well. It only takes into account the first 10 points. We'll go into that in a bit more detail shortly. So if we go back to the all points method, which is probably the more common method, and I'll talk you through each of the configuration options for this. So as I said, we can set the minimum points for recalculation. So that's basically saying it will not allow you to automatically recalculate the breakpoint, which is this area here, or the recalculation event within X number of points, and in this case 10. So if we push that out to 20, you'll see the point at which it recalculates has changed. We can also set the number of points that it's looking for a run, and we can configure that from 5 till 9, or a trend, and again from 5 till 9. We'll leave these both as 7 and 6. So those values go into actually identifying both when it will highlight a run or a trend, but also when it will automatically recalculate the average and the upper and lower control limits if you have selected it to do that based on a run or a trend. So the last area of configurability is how you want to recalculate the average and the upper and lower control limits. So as mentioned, there's several options for that. You can choose to have no recalculation event. So you'll see what happens here is it does not recalculate. It is still highlighting outliers. It is still highlighting trends and runs, but it is not recalculating the average. Okay, but it is recalculating. It is recalculating a new average and a new upper and lower control limits, but it does not put in a breakpoint or a recalculation event. You can set it to be based on a run only. So you'll see it is now recalculating based on a run that I identified here. But it is no longer recalculating based on the trend like it was earlier. You can set it to recalculate on a trend only. You can see there is no recalculation for the run events that are identified, but there is a recalculation or a break event based on the trend. You can set it to run or trend. That means it will recalculate whether it identifies a run or a trend, and it can do both on the same chart. And you can also set it to recalculate based on a manual break, which allows you to input up to 2 breakpoints. Now you have 2 options when it comes to the manual break. You can select a value from a drop-down list, and that is just picking up all of the values on the x-axis. So for example, we can pick the 1st, the 11th, 2010. And then we could pick another one. And that has automatically inserted 2 breakpoints. Just note, if you want to clear that, there is a value none up the top, which you can input. So the other way that you can set a manual breakpoint is actually a custom. So effectively a QlikSense calculation that can be input. So this will be useful if you want to do it, have it dynamic, so that based on multiple departments or organizations can have their own breakpoints based and just keep it to one eye chart. So just as an example of that, I've got a calculation here that we can input. And all we're doing here is we're saying if today equals the 14th of the 10th, 2018, which it does not, then put the breakpoint in 1st of the 10th, 2010. If today was the 14th of the 10th, 2018, then we would be saying put the breakpoint at 1st of the 6th, 2010. So this gives you a lot of flexibility to configure the breakpoints dynamically based on the user or the department or the organization of the user. So you should be able to cover many different departments with just one single eye chart. So if we add that in, you'll see it's then adding in a breakpoint based on that calculation. So that's an overview of the all points method. As I said, there are 2 different methods that we have. The all points method, which includes all data points up until the recalculation event. All those data points are included in the average and included in the upper and lower control limits. It's also worth noting that all points after the recalculation event up until the end of the chart or up until the next recalculation event are also included in the next set of average and also the next lot of upper and lower control limits. So what we'll look at now is the baseline points method. As I said, with the baseline points method, you set the minimum number of points that you want to be included. I'll just reset this. The minimum number of points that you want to be included in the average figure and the upper and lower control limit figures. So again, in this case where we have no recalculation event, it includes the first 15 points to come up with a figure for the average and the upper and lower control limits. So that would effectively be from here till approximately here. All other configuration options are effectively the same as the all points method. So you can still set run, the number of points for runs, the number of points for trends, and the recalculation event rules are all exactly the same. So that's the same across both methods. The only thing that's different is the number of points that go into actually making up the average and the upper and lower control limits. So we've talked to you through an overview of the Acumen eye chart. We've looked at how to format the lines and the points and some of the labels for the measures. And we've looked at the two different methods that can be used when defining the calculations and also some of the configuration options for those. So the last thing we're going to look at is some of the general chart appearance settings. So from a sorting perspective, always have the value of your x-axis at the top and sorting in chronological order. Again, just standard QlikSense functionality that you have access to here. With regards to general chart appearance, again, very much standard QlikSense functionality here. So we can add in titles, we can add in subtitles and footnotes, and I'd highly recommend using these to communicate to users how you have set the eye chart configuration settings. So in this case, I'm going to say 7-point run and 6-point trend. No recalculation. And you'll see that appears just like it would with any other Qlik chart. The legend, the x-axis, the y-axis are all pretty straightforward. So the last thing I'd like to show you is the data handling, and effectively this is a calculation condition that we can put on the chart. And this is quite handy because if the user makes selections and has too few points in their eye chart, then you possibly do not want to show them that. So I've got an example calculation here. I'll just talk you through that calculation. So effectively we're saying get possible count of the date field, or in this case this is really just my dimension, and if the number of possible values available are greater than 20, then display the chart. If it's less than 20, then do not display the chart. So if I apply that, I'll display a message if the calculation condition is not fulfilled, and I will say too few points to show eye chart. And if we make a selection just on a couple of data points, you'll see that calculation condition is being respected. So that's the different configuration options for the eye chart. So thank you for your time. I hope that has been of interest. We welcome your feedback and suggestions, not just on this chart, but other extensions that you would like us to develop, and we look forward to publishing our roadmap and improving this in the future. This is available for download on the VisLib data market, or if you also feel free to email us at extensions@acumenbi.co.nz. Thank you for listening.